My brother tricked my fiancée on the day of our wedding, making her believe that I cheated on her. Now, he's chosen the hospital to sue and pay the compensation. Have you ever had your entire life destroyed right in front of you, without even being given the chance to defend yourself? That was the day of my wedding. In 1 second, I thought I was marrying this woman and would spend my whole life with her. In the next, everything disappeared, like magic. And the worst part wasn't bad luck, it wasn't a mistake, it was planned, organized by someone who shouldn't have betrayed me, my own brother. This didn't start with my wedding. It started years before, long before I met Kate. It started with my brother Marcos and his ex, Rebecca. Marcos had been in a relationship with Rebecca for years. He was obsessed with her, always acting as if she belonged to him. But no matter what he did, she never seemed that interested in him. Then, one night, at a family gathering, everything exploded. Rebecca admitted in front of everyone that she felt something for me. I never gave her any reason, and I don't even know why she did what she did. I never did anything to make her think I wanted her, but Marcos didn't care about any of that. In his mind, I had stolen her from him. He went crazy, accusing me of secretly being with her and calling me a traitor. No matter what I said, he didn't want to listen. Rebecca broke up with him that night. Since then, Marcos made it his mission to ruin me. At first, it was just words. He would talk behind my back, making up things to make me look bad. But when that wasn't enough, he started getting more creative. It started with my friends, small things, subtle criticisms, planting doubts. A friend suddenly became cold with me, and I didn't know why until I found out Marcos had been telling lies to him. One time, he told my best friend that I had been criticizing him behind his back for years. Another time, he told someone that I was only being friends with him to get closer to a girl he liked. It didn't matter whether the lies made sense or not. He knew that if he told them enough times, people would start believing him. Then, he began interfering with my work. I had a job at a small company after college. Everything was going well until I started hearing strange rumors about me. A coworker, whom I barely spoke to, suddenly thought I was trying to get him fired. My boss started treating me differently, and I didn't understand why until someone told me that Marcos had been saying that I was planning to leave and criticizing the company in interviews. My parents ignored everything or didn't want to get involved in a fight between brothers. Although this fight was only in Marcos's mind, they always saw him as the one who needed more understanding. When I told them what he was doing, they acted like I was exaggerating. They didn't believe me when I said he was turning people against me, even when once he stole money, taking a few hundred from my wallet when I was at my parents' house. My mom simply said that he probably borrowed it and forgot to tell me. So, when the day of my wedding came, I should have known. I should have expected something. The night before the wedding, I wanted some time to myself while everyone was running around, planning and stressing me out. He was setting the trap. Hours before I arrived at the venue, he was already there and had brought a woman. A woman I had never seen before. She had evidence, messages, call logs, a video that supposedly showed me with her a few nights before my wedding. When I found all this out, it was already too late. Kate was gone, her family wouldn't even look at me, and my parents just stood there silently. Marcos wasn't just watching. He was leading this fabricated witch hunt. He was the one showing the messages, the one confirming the supposed details of the affair, and the moment I tried to ask what was going on, he stepped forward, acting disappointed, shaking his head as if he had no choice but to expose me. No one gave me the opportunity to explain myself. No one showed me the supposed evidence. Kate blocked me, and the last thing she said to me was that she wanted nothing to do with me. I did everything I could, called, texted, begged her family to let me speak with her, but nothing worked. Eventually, the threat started. If I didn't leave her alone, they would call the police. That's when I knew everything was over. It was time to pack up, move on, leave it behind. Years went by, and I convinced myself it was something I had to live with. Then, suddenly, my mom sent me a message. After all this time, after not speaking to me for years, she suddenly wanted to talk. In the message, she apologized and said everything was Marcos's fault. So, this is a summary of my story with my family, with whom I haven't spoken in years. Now, my mother seems to have discovered the truth, but I'm not sure if I want to talk to them right now. My parents are just as guilty as Marcos because they protected him all this time and never gave me the chance to explain myself or anything like that. The only reason I would talk to my mother is to tell her this, because they never gave me the opportunity to tell my side. They believed Marcos, and now they're probably in some trouble because of their golden child. What would you do? Move on with your lives, or be petty and talk to them just to say some truths to their faces? Yes, I have been reading everyone's comments, but even though years have passed, I've never had closure. And I'm not talking about closure where we talk, apologize, and move on. I mean closure where I can open up to my parents, or whatever is necessary. That's the only reason I answered one of my mother's calls, and that's what this update is about. There are many things I've learned now, but I'll tell you first, and then give my opinion. She wasn't calling just to ask for forgiveness, which already took years. She was calling because everything had finally fallen apart. After I left, Marcos wasted no time. He and Kate started officially dating only a few months after my ruined wedding. Marcos didn't just want to ruin my life. He also wanted to be with my fiancée as some kind of revenge for what I supposedly did to him. It not only seems strange to me, but to others, it seems strange how quickly things happened between them. But Marcos never cared what others thought, so that wasn't a deterrent. Still, my parents accepted him, and Kate's family welcomed him like he was some sort of hero because he was the man who saved Kate from a lying cheat like me. They got married, had a daughter, and for years it seemed like he had won. But Marcos never changed, and this is where things started to fall apart for them. At first, everything seemed fine. Kate had gotten exactly what she wanted: a safe life, a stable marriage, and a man who hadn't cheated on her. But the cracks started showing almost immediately. Marcos was never really the devoted husband he pretended to be. He wasn't affectionate, and he wasn't considerate. As soon as he had Kate, he stopped trying, and when the thrill of taking something from me faded, so did his interest in her. Then, she found out he was cheating, and not with just anyone, but with the same woman he had used to frame me. A friend of Marcos's, or something like that. The great savior ended up being unfaithful. I can't be the only one who sees the irony. The same woman who, you remember, had gone to my wedding to show proof that I was cheating with her. Now, I wonder if those messages and evidence were edited, using Marcos's own chats and photos. I don't wonder. I'm almost sure. But if you believe someone's so deceitful, it's likely you'll end up getting fooled. And that's exactly what happened to Kate. At first, Kate didn't want to believe it. She had built her whole world around the idea that Marcos had saved her from a liar, that she had made the right decision and avoided a big bullet with me. She ignored the signs. She never saw the signs in me because I didn't give them, but with Marcos, she lived with glasses that blinded her every second. It's getting more and more ironic. But when this woman confessed everything, there was no longer any way to ignore it and think that the great Marcos wouldn't be capable of doing this. I don't know why she did it, maybe out of guilt, maybe for revenge, maybe because she wanted him for herself, maybe because Marcos had cheated on her too, but she told Kate everything, about the infidelity in great detail, as well as the lies she told at my wedding to ruin my life. She even said she had nothing against me but would have done anything for Marcos at that moment. According to my mother, and by extension Kate's family, they were also devastated. They were the ones who bet on a horse that not only didn't win but ended up being the worst of all. The worst part is that she had a conversation with Marcos, not about the infidelity, although that too, but because he ruined her life with a lie, and from what it seemed, it was just to ruin mine. He didn't deny it, barely fought for her. As soon as she said she couldn't stay married to him, he left without fighting, without regret, just walked away. Now, Kate was alone, knowing everything that had happened. She reached out to my parents, trying to see if she could talk to me. It reminds me of the story of the wolf and the shepherd, only here the liar is the wolf everyone believed. And when they discovered it was all a lie, it was already too late. Kate had ruined a good relationship with me, or at least I thought we had, and had a daughter with a very wolf. That's why my mother was calling me now. They want to talk to fix what's broken and, more importantly, they want me to listen to Kate. Well, in my opinion, I think they're expecting too much. They're expecting that, after Kate was used by my brother, I should accept her. I'm not interested in taking the used things for my brother just because he doesn't want them anymore. It's not that Kate didn't know about my brother and therefore could believe him. She knew very well, and I think she just used the excuse to be with him. You can call me paranoid, but for someone to start dating another, who happens to be their fiancé's brother, right after the wedding, is very suspicious. And you can call me a bad person for saying Kate is a used thing, but that's what she was. She was used by Marcos, and I have no interest in taking her now. Why would I do that? So that, after a while, she would leave me for another man? I saw many questions in the comments of this post and the previous one, and I realized I left out some details because I didn't want it to be too long. It's harder to fix later if it gets too lengthy. I wanted to clarify some things, especially about my brother and Rebecca, since that seems to be one of the points people are discussing the most. Let's see if what I have to say clears that up. My brother Marcos was completely in love with Rebecca. He wasn't just in love with her. He was obsessed. They had been together for years, and he was planning to marry her. Our family knew, and for a long time, it seemed like it was a done deal. He had already proposed to her, and as far as I remember, he was convinced they would be together forever. So, what happened surprised us all. Rebecca mentioned it out of nowhere at that family gathering, with no warning, no signs. She simply announced in front of everyone that she felt something for me. And just to be clear, I never did anything to encourage that, nor did I see any signs of anything like that. I barely had a relationship with Rebecca, only the kind of relationship one might have with their brother's girlfriend, whom they saw occasionally. After that, she tried to contact me, but I rejected her immediately. I wasn't attracted to her, didn't care, and didn't want to make the situation worse. I knew how Marcos had dealt with it, and the last thing I wanted was to make things worse. Thinking back, Marcos's level of obsession with her wasn't normal, but Rebecca wasn't normal either. If she chose to be with Marcos and then did what she did, which I think makes sense when everything happened, it's not like I didn't care and let things run their course. I tried to smooth things over with him, tried to explain that I had no part in what she did, but Rebecca made that impossible. Instead of letting everything calm down, she kept insisting, sending messages about how I was a real man and how she wanted me instead of him. It was disturbing and only fueled Marcos's hatred, especially since some of the messages were sent to Marcos himself. No matter what I said, he refused to believe I had nothing to do with it. He interpreted it as a definitive betrayal, convinced that I had secretly been after her the whole time. This led to our relationship falling apart, and Marcos doing all the things he did over the years. At first, I felt sorry for him, but when he started ruining my life, I lost my sympathy for him. He wasn't even invited to my wedding. Many people have asked if I plan to meet with Kate, and honestly, I'm still thinking about it. There's no way I could forgive her, let alone consider what she expects. But like my mother, I think telling her many of the things I wrote here could be therapeutic. I never had the chance to defend myself, never got to say to her what I thought, good or bad, and I at least deserve that. I know some people think I should be a better person and just let it go, but when you go through something like I did, saying it is easier than doing it. You need closure, even if that closure isn't what the other person thinks they're going to get. As for my mother, I told her many of the things I wrote here, but I didn't include them in my update for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Besides, the conversation had many personal details that I didn't want to edit later. But if you want a summary, my relationship with my parents is completely dead. I'm surprised that many people agreed that talking to Kate to say the things I wrote here was the best thing to do. I expected them to tell me something else, not to be vengeful or whatever. We met at a place in my city. I wasn't going to travel to meet her. I didn't think she deserved that. When I got there, she was already sitting in a chair and wasn't alone. She was with the girl she had with Marcos, sitting next to her. I don't know how old she is, but I estimate around 5 or 6. Kate was definitely nervous and didn't know how to start. Meanwhile, her daughter was looking at me with big eyes. I felt sad for her because she could have been my daughter, but all this turned out very differently from how I planned my life. Kate had changed over the years. She didn't look as good as I remembered, probably due to the stress of living with someone like Marcos. I know a person like that can make your life miserable, and that's probably what he did to Kate. Still, I didn't feel sorry for her. She was so nervous that, at first, she seemed to stutter. She wasn't forming sentences I could understand. But still, I knew what it was about. All of this. I was always the person who fixed her problems. They weren't big problems, small things, but still, I fixed them. The real reason she was sitting in front of me now was that everything in her life had fallen apart. She wanted me to fix it like I had before, but it wasn't that simple, and I wasn't going to let her think it was. I had questions, many questions, and I wasn't going to let her get away with them easily. First, I wanted to know what was really in that video. What caused all the destruction? What ruined my life? She told me that Marcos had brought a woman to the wedding to frame me, but I needed to understand exactly what had happened. She hesitated, then explained that the woman who arrived with Marcos that day was an old friend of his. Well, I already knew that. What I didn't know was that in the video, there was this woman in bed. But at no point was I seen or heard. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Everything I went through was for nothing because she was telling me now that it had been so easy to convince her. She never questioned Marcos's story. When the truth finally came out, that Marcos was cheating on her, that he used the woman to frame me, she realized that the man in the video was probably Marcos, the one who was recording. But even after everything had fallen apart, Kate hadn't contacted me. And now, after all this time, she was sitting in front of me asking for my help. If she was able to believe Marcos's version, she could also believe that I would forgive her and help her. Maybe even take care of her daughter. That would be very convenient for her. My intention was to say everything I needed to say, but I still needed more answers. And there was the little girl there, which I found more unpleasant because the only reason she brought her was to get pity or to stop me from saying anything I had planned. So I asked her, "Why did you believe Marcos instead of me? What made you trust him so much?" She answered that she had had doubts for a while about the marriage, that she was on edge before the wedding, and that the proof convinced her that she shouldn't marry me. But now she realized the mistake, and that I was the one who should have ended things with her. Then she asked me if we could at least try, give it a chance. Was she with someone? No, but it seemed to her like it was certain that even if she were, she would give us a chance. Why? Well, I don't know. I told her no, that I wasn't going to pick up the trash Marcos had left behind. I didn't use that word because her daughter was present, and I also made it clear I was referring to her and not the daughter. I can be vengeful, but only with people who deserve it. I told her never to contact me again. After I left, I wrote one last message before blocking her, where I said everything I thought without holding back. I think writing is a better way to express yourself because you can take the time to think it through. You can be more yourself, you know? Again, I'm not writing this to sound like a good guy. I think I did the exact opposite. But life is not perfect, and you don't always make the best decisions. I also don't think I'm going to hell just for returning a small part of what they did to me. And for her using her daughter in the meeting, I think she deserves even more. This is crazy, I have to update this, but I'll keep it brief. I'm absolutely horrified by all of this. Right after Marcos and Kate's divorce, Kate got full custody of the little girl. That's not what horrifies me. It was the most normal thing in the world since Marcos couldn't care less about his daughter. What horrifies me is what Kate did next. Kate left the girl at my house without warning. She didn't even try to talk or make sure the girl was being taken care of. She just dropped her at the door in the middle of the night. I found out in the morning when I was leaving for work, and she was sitting at the door in the cold. She told me her mother left her there and drove off in her car. I immediately called my parents to explain the situation. They came to pick her up immediately, but I also called Child Protective Services because I think Kate deserves some kind of punishment for doing this to a child. At least my parents decided to take full custody of the girl, since neither of her biological parents wanted to take care of her. This happened a few weeks ago, and I don't have much news. I don't talk to my parents about it, nor about anything else. I just contacted my mom to let her know what Kate left at my door, but after that, and after making sure the authorities were involved, I blocked them again. It seems they keep trying to drag me into their lives, but I'm far away from them now. I'm not sure how much information I can bring in the next update since my contacts are limited, but if there's something worth sharing, I'll make another update. And if I don't come back, you already know, please don't ask me in private messages. It took me a while, but at least I have an update on my story, which has to do with my ex's arrest for abandoning her daughter at my door. While there's a lot to tell in this update, Kate told the police she left the girl at my house because I was her biological father. There's no possibility of that because I left everything behind long before the girl was born, long before I could have gotten her pregnant. But how could I prove I wasn't lying? I had to take a test just to prove it. The results showed the obvious, and at least I was able to clear that up, but Kate didn't. Because even if I were the biological father, she still abandoned her daughter at my door, and worse, without telling me and leaving her alone for half the night. So, she was sentenced to a year in prison for this brilliant idea she had. I don't know what she expected me to do. Anyway, my parents are still the temporary guardians of the girl, but they plan to become her permanent guardians by suing Kate and Marcos for child support. I don't know if adoption is a possibility, but they still want both of them to pay for the care of the girl. I spoke to my father after years of not doing so, just to bring this update that many people asked for. So, I hope you appreciate the effort. And no, they're not happy about being parents again at their age, but I see it as a chance to do things right this time. We don't know where Marcos is, but the trial against him can still happen, while we know exactly where Kate is, and when she gets out, she'll be waiting for child support for her daughter. Do you think Kate was always like this, or did Marcos destroy her to the point that she's in this position now? They found Marcos after my parents sued him for child support for his daughter, but the circumstances in which he was found are interesting, and I should tell you about them. Although now that I read what I wrote, it seems like they found him dead, but that's not the case. He was found by the police while fleeing to avoid paying the overdue child support. When they approached him, he resisted arrest and also attacked one of the officers with a rock he found on the scene. Another officer had to subdue him and shot him in the abdomen, which didn't put his life at risk, but kept him hospitalized for weeks before he was transferred to prison. He will spend the next 3 years there, serving time just to pay child support, as Kate is doing now. At least the judge ordered the sale of his car, the only asset he owns, to cover the overdue installments. They can't say I'm vengeful because none of this was my fault, but yes, I'm happy that it happened this way. With my parents, we no longer have contact, and I got all this information from someone else, someone I didn't mention in the story, so I don't think it's relevant to mention them now. I only say this to respond to those who accused me of forgiving my parents.